think I can. I think I can. I think I can. Are we live? Are we live? Yes. All right. I am here, Halcyon, with my friend Anahita, and this is a continued effort to have conversations with extraordinary people. I've been doing these Hug Nation broadcasts, but every once in a while, I'm so lucky to do a Conversation Nation. By being having a very interesting life, I end up having the opportunity to cross paths with extraordinary people. And what's amazing is as I get older and older, Anahita's not getting older, but I keep getting older. And so the people that I know just get more and more amazing and do more and more amazing things. And so first, just the brief bio that you sent me, so that I can include a few things that I don't want to forget. Visionary, strategist, organizer, somatic trauma therapist, and plant medicine expert. Recently involved with Project OneVoice, Sanity Sanctuary, and Plant Remedy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody.
So wait, so I'll admit that when you said, "Hey, would you be interested in talking about?" I said, "Yes." So I would love for you to kind of I give a little explanation for Project OneVoice and what kind of inspired you to put your energy in there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Project OneVoice is essentially a social media campaign that's completely grassroots and nonpartisan, that completely organically came together. I never set out to do it. Nobody else set out to do it. It almost felt organically, it just happened. All these people got together and they said, we want to put all of our creative force behind this effort to protect and save our democracy. So I'll kind of take a little step back and give you a little bit of history. How about that?
Please.
Okay, so this is like back in May. We're all going through our own processes with the pandemic, a couple months in, and like learning and dropping into a flow. And I had personally been a bit out of the loop. And one day I just like lifted my head from all the stuff that I was working on, and I tuned into social media and I saw a lot of division. I saw a lot of fighting. I saw a lot of people going at each other, and I saw a lot of disinformation. I mean, narratives that will make you just feel like, wait, people believe that? And so it was an awakening in a way of just realizing, wow, like there's this energy moving through Facebook, but not just that, but moving through the community. And that's when I had a couple of conversations with friends who had been wounded through some conversations that they had. I thankfully hadn't had that experience at that stage. And we decided to put a little group support together of like 5-6 people. And oh my goodness, within 2 weeks, we had 100 people. And within a month, we had 200 people. We now have nearly 800 people in this private group called Sanity Sanctuary. And Sanity Sanctuary is basically a place that we come to talk about disinformation, to find real information, to talk about fact hygiene, and how do we recognize psyops, manipulations that are trying to take advantage of our compassion and our connection and the things that we care about, our value systems, and witnessing how they can get manipulated, but also like holding accountable all the content creators out there that are putting material out into the world and really asking for that extra layer of mindfulness to ensure that the content that we're putting out into the world is factual, to know where it's coming from. So that was kind of that space. It was supposed to be both emotional support and a little bit of also like processes on how to decipher information, understand what's good information, what's clean information, and who to trust. That was kind of the intention.
I mean, I just want to reflect on my experience with that group and how helpful it was, because I didn't know there was that many people in it, first of all, but there's something, especially early on in the group, where I heard people sharing things and sharing experiences of like really painful attacks, that they were receiving from people that they had social experiences in the past that they felt like they had relationship to. And just having this kind of support group of having other people going through this. Because one of the things that was so kind of difficult is that like isolating feeling of like, am I crazy? Like is this person that I've known for so long, like, how did this happen? Like, I don't, and that kind of like really like unsettling feeling of like, where's the disconnect in what's going on? And having like a bunch of people all coming like, oh, I had a similar experience. I had a similar experience. I had a similar experience. Where like that person, had crossed the line, and it's like, ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's very powerful. Our ability to self-study and self-reflect, to me, is a great compass of knowing whether I'm caught up in my ego or am I in alignment. And what I find is that if I'm finding myself asking questions of like, wait, am I wrong? That question itself, I mean, I ask everyone, I'm like, you ask that question all the time. Am I wrong? Am I right? You got to study. You got to be curious. You got to consider that you might be wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that question itself is still clarifying, where you find yourself in a place of like, I don't actually for sure know the answers, and I want to go out there and find the answers. And it feels really helpful when there are other people reflecting that they're also having the same challenge.
And another thing that helps is like when you start to at least be open to the possibility that your information is having an element of manipulation too. And almost you have to assume that everything is going some level of manipulation. So it's not like I'm the hero, you're the villain. I'm the smart one, you're the dumb one. It's more like, okay, to what degree do I have to filter versus what degree is that person not doing their filtering, and just kind of like letting go of the absolutes is for me is the only way to kind of maintain compassion towards this sea of people that are all trying to figure things out.
Absolutely. It's so true. I couldn't agree with you more. Is that we have to be willing to consider that we're wrong at all times, to be open enough to be shown, because cognitive bias is a real thing. We all have it. We all have it, and it will blow your mind. I mean, there's ton of research that's been done, and it will blow your mind. Some of the research that we've been looking at shows that a graph that's showing a trend, for example, of inequality going up for whatever reason, right? If you show this to a certain group of people that believe that inequality is going up, they will see it as going up. If you show it to people who believe equality is going down, they literally will see that graph as proving their point that it's going down.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, then how much do we really know? How much of what we think is the reality and the truth is truly true? And this is where the collective reflection makes sense, because then I look at, oh, this person that I respect their opinion and we share values, and this person that I respect their cognitive capabilities and we share values, or this person that I don't necessarily share a whole lot of values with, but I respect them because they come from a background and they know how to analyze and have conversations. We don't have to agree on the topics and the outcome and the solutions, but we gotta find a place where we can agree on a certain set of facts. Like, these numbers are going up or coming down. I mean, that's math. That's not an opinion. When people say everybody's entitled to their truth, I'm like, we gotta pause right there, because let's talk about truth versus fact. Truth feels like to me, truth feels like, oh, it's like what I know. It's like a feeling in my body. That's the truth. I feel it in my body. There's like an energetic piece to it besides the cognitive. There's an emotional element to it. And that could be that, hey, half cup full is true and half cup half empty is also true. And so these both things can be true at the same time. But what is a fact? Fact is that there's this much water in this cup. That's a fact. So to me, it's how do we come back to a factual reality, even if we don't agree on the perspective? And so the medicine of this time is so much about recognizing that, just like Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so we can all be experiencing the same reality and have wildly different experiences around it. And now, how do we find the common ground and compassion in that space? That's the hard part. And that's been kind of the big challenge. And we got these people in a group. People felt really inspired. We share a lot of information, the psychology, how propaganda works. And propaganda exists everywhere. It exists on the right, exists on the left, exists in media, exists in education. It exists everywhere. Right. And so it's not so much a partisan issue. It's more about, okay, like there's a lot of interests that are trying to grasp on our attention and our vote and our money. And ultimately, when all of that, we just pause all of that, look away, how do we find our common ground as a community together? Because that's the only place that we can create change from.
So what about, once somebody feels like the existing structures of, for example, journalism, if you think that journalists are part of a propaganda system, then this whole basic concept of like getting back to the truth or back to the facts becomes this kind of irreconcilable argument about, well, the people providing your facts are manipulating you, or the people providing your facts are manipulating you. And it's like, how do we address that divide?
Mm-hmm. That's a really great question. Like, where are the interests, right? So one thing's for sure is that there are certainly agendas and interests attempting to manipulate masses, some within the media and journalism and some outside. And I think what's really important is to recognize that it's not a black and white kind of a situation where either all journalists are doing this or all media is doing this or none of them are doing it. There's somewhere in the middle. Some are doing it, some are not doing it. So the process of being a conscious and informed citizen is deciphering where to go for that information and what media source is biased and how is it funded. That's really important. So to me, the most important piece is that I like to go and look at media that's publicly funded by public dollars, not big donor money, not advertising money. So to me, it's like following the money is one way of identifying where I can go to listen to media that serves me. Now, the whole narrative of all journalists are in on it and lying, it just doesn't really click. And I'll tell you a couple different examples why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the entire Catholic Church scandal of pedophilia was blown by journalists. The entire Me Too movement was a news article in New York Times. So we look at different political scandals, and the Watergate scandal, that was also journalists blowing the cover. I mean, we're talking about journalists delivering up until a couple years ago a lot of deep value, bringing a lot of information to the front and center for the mainstream to talk about. So no, I don't believe that all journalists are, manipulating people. I think there's good journalism, and part of our work has been about teaching and educating. How do we find that? It's on a cognitive level. That's number one. And then second layer is on a body level. And this is where I think the mind-body medicine, the wellness industry can really connect with this piece, because it's not just cognitive, it's also your physical body. How do I feel in my body when I hear this? Because our body also has wisdom. And so when I'm hearing a narrative that instantly makes me go into a space of anxiety and lack of trust of my environment and the people around me, and I feel really discomfort in my body right away, and that happens all the time, I tune into that source, then that source is manipulating my emotions. It's not a grounded space. And when I can listen to the same news story on, say, PBS NewsHour in the evening, or I can listen to that same news story on CNN or Fox News. So they'll get very different kind of perspectives towards the daily news. And so you will notice how the emotions and the opinion pieces are manipulating individuals in one instance, and other places just clean, clear reporting. And I've gotten to a place that that's what I value the most, is Where is the news source? Is it funded? But who is it funded by? Are they attempting to create a sensationalized environment with lots of disagreement? Because that's what sells. That's what really drives clicks and viewerships. And I'll add one other layer to this. Something I had a conversation about 1.5 years ago. This beautiful, beautiful man about how we consume media and the medium by which we consume media and the effects of that on our nervous system. So the best form of consuming media is actually reading it, because it slows down to your own pace. You're looking at the words as you go across, and you have opportunity to take a step back when you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Let me read it again. Now you can go back and read it again. So you're only really reading the words. And if something doesn't make sense, you go back and you have opportunity to slow down, process every word and see, does that feel right? Like, that doesn't feel good. Maybe I abandon this. Now, radio, you're listening to the sound, so there's more emotion involved. You can hear the tones of the individuals. So it's a little bit more affects deeper in your nervous system when you read versus when you listen. Now, the third is the images, with between the colors and the lights and the breaking news and all the layers of voices. There's a lot that's trying to capture your attention. The lights and action and noise captures you, and you can't even have an opportunity to slow down and go back. Wait, what did they just say? It's happening so fast that it's almost like a programming and less about consumption and education and understanding. And so to me, these are the different ways. Yes, there's manipulation, but we get to choose the medium. We get to choose where we tune in. We get to choose what voices do we highlight and do we echo through our own platforms, through our own voice in community. It's a lot. It's like your breath.
I mean, I think that there's a really interesting space in there about that, like that checking in and tuning in, and your because I think that's a rich place to be manipulated. If when you're like, oh, this feels so true, like I saw Russell Brand shared his daily prayer, and one of the things he prayed for was to be in touch with his intuition, but not get caught up in superstition or something like that, where you like to recognize that there is an inner wisdom, but it also, you can start to feel like, oh yeah, this theory, it feels, my body's going like this. That's got to be true. Like, that doesn't mean it's true. No, that means that you just got programmed. And it's like, I think that's just it's such an easy place for people to then throw their logic out the window when they kind of get caught up in that.
Absolutely. I mean, this goes into, it's kind of a good segue into Project OneVoice and kind of the approach that we're taking here, because Project OneVoice is essentially, once we start having these conversations at Sanity Sanctuary, people start like, well, okay, it's great that we're having these conversations, but how do we do something positive? How do we go out there and become part of the solution? And so we start having a lot of those conversations. How do we talk to our friends and families that are thinking, not just thinking differently, but have bought into really wild narratives that are questionable? They're not evidence-based by any stretch of imagination. They're more like stories being told. So how do we have those conversations? How do we come back to that space? Well, we have to first understand what makes individuals susceptible to disinformation. So we already talked about the mediums by which we consume information is really important. But what's also important is understanding why can we not have logical conversations when we're in this triggered state? So this kind of goes back to understanding trauma and the nervous system and how the body works. When we go through something, I think the term trauma gets thrown around a lot loosely, but really the clinical definition of trauma is inability to fight or flight. It's essentially a loss of control in the face of something that feels threatening. So our nervous system has a mode of sympathetic nervous response. And when we're not in a homeostasis baseline, we get activated, triggered, fearful, angry, whatever that is. When we get triggered, the brain essentially makes an assessment based on data that's coming in that there's a threat. And that threat almost always feels existential. because the brain actually isn't evolved enough to differentiate between thoughts that are threatening and actual physical threat. So our body responds in the same way if a lion was chasing you than when you're having an argument with your, family that has different opinions than you do. So you have the same kind of reaction happening in our brain. And what happens is that when our sympathetic nervous response kicks in, it prepares us to fight or flight. So we get like all this blood that pumps into our limbs, and our heart becomes beats really fast, and our breathing is shallow and fast. Our pupils are dilated. It's a very primal experience. In order to make all of that happen, we need to get energy from somewhere. And what happens is that the energy comes from our digestive system, from our immune functions, from our sexual functions, and from deprioritizing our cognitive logical brain. So the front of our brain, which is where we do all of our logical processing. Deep in our brain is our reptilian brain, where our fight and flight kind of survival mechanism operates. When that's happening, our cognitive logical brain is not happening. It's not online at all. So it's no surprise. I mean, we've all experienced this. If you've ever been in an argument and you said things you didn't mean, 5 minutes later, you were like, oh man, I don't know why I said that. I didn't really mean it. Or somebody was trying to talk you out of throwing a punch and you do it anyways. You're like, oh, I wish I had listened. How come I didn't? Well, because our logical, good decision-making brain isn't online when we're angry and frustrated or scared. Now, pandemic. Can you fight with a pandemic? Nah. Can you escape? Can you fly from a pandemic? Nah. Can we escape the mask ordinance in a store? Oh, you could try. It's not going to have a lot of good results. So there's a lot of layers. Can we escape the economical challenges? We're kind of stuck. So in a way, all of this experience is lack of control. It's triggering us, especially if we've had experiences in our life of trauma, where we felt so out of control. We had no opportunity to take charge of our own life. Well, that gets triggering. So we're getting all triggered, all our past trauma, by the way, like secret, not so secret. We all have some level of trauma in our lives. We're all traumatized. So all of our collective trauma is being triggered, and we're fearful. And what happens is, in that state, we're very susceptible to any information that will help us make sense of our reality, because our brain feels really calm when it can label something and say, oh, this experience has happened before and it looks like this, and therefore I can calm down. It's not a new experience. When the brain gets a new kind of experience, it panics. It doesn't know how to respond. So when somebody comes along, when I'm in the middle of my panic response and I'm looking for anything I can hold on to make sense of my reality, somebody comes along and offers me a simplified version of that reality that helps me feel like I know what's happening. It's going to be very attractive. And I'm going to latch onto that. And then I'm going to say, oh, that feels good. Even if the narrative is not necessarily a positive or empowering narrative.
Right.
But on the short term, I feel safe enough. It's like getting into an abusive relationship and coming out of another one. So to escape from one into another one, right? So that's really what's happening. And so when we look at it from that perspective, our job becomes, and again, I believe that understanding trauma is a critical study for everyone, truly. And when I had the opportunity and the privilege of studying, understanding trauma 4 years ago, I got trained as a somatic trauma therapist. I learned the rule number one, when people are activated in that state. Rule number one, establish safety, psychological and physical safety. What do we do? Well, most of us just don't actually think like that. Most of us just fight. Does that really work? Does that really help? No. And so we have to, that's kind of where the Project OneVoice came about. We were like, how do we take an approach to having conversation that's trauma informed, that looks at establishing psychological safety? But I got to also be honest with you, it doesn't mean that we validate narratives, but we validate the very real human emotion. that gets us into rabbit holes. What is that? It's kindness, it's compassion, it's deep care. Really, that's what it is at its root. Anyone we have conversations, why do you believe the QAnon narrative, for example? Well, it's because they care. They actually care inside. They're like, I care about these children. They truly care. So we want to validate that, because that's where we connect on the care level. We all care. It's the narrative that gets twisted and manipulated. But if we just aim to first establish psychological safety by acknowledging that we all have compassion for children, and then from that place, be able to just give plain data, not from even news sources, straight from scientific newspapers and research papers, straight from the different government organization reports, straight from nonprofit statistics organizations, and be able to just provide clean and clear information that helps us just make some sense of our reality. We can't try to make this big jump from, oh, you believe in these things, and now, oh, come here and join me in this narrative. No, the best we can do is like, let's stop fighting so we can all find a baseline of a calm nervous system to then open up access to the cognitive capabilities.
That's so huge, and there's such a significant, it's so easy to fall into the frustration with where someone else is, and you mentioned in the beginning about just what kind of prompt this, like realizing that division, that divisiveness, and when people go immediately to, you're an idiot, you're a sheep, you're blah 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 blah, like there is no way to hear one another. There's no way, and I think that what you're talking about, it provides a framework to understand, like, oh, you're not an idiot, you're not a sheep, you are responding in a way that totally makes sense to you, to things that matter to you. You're trying to be a good person, you're trying to be a hero in the story, just like we all are. Now, is there a way we can kind of clarify the pieces of the story so we can keep being heroic and maybe like not be set down the wrong path of the story? Not that we're bad people, you're not a bad person, you're a good person. But without without that compassion and the ability to let the other person be a good guy, you can't connect.
Absolutely. And I gotta be also honest with you that it feels like a little bit of idealistic approach, and it really works best if individuals are just kind of thinking about it, engaging in this kind of conspiratorial materials that are questionable. Not all conspiratorial materials are questionable. So, but they're engaging in some that are truly questionable, and they're kind of curious, asking questions. It's a really good opportunity in that space to have this engagement. But if people are so far down the rabbit hole that they can't even have those conversations, our best chance is to hold space for them, but at the same time, ensure that we do harm reduction. I think that's really important, because this is not necessarily a passive approach where we say, oh, we just accept everyone and celebrate everyone, even when we recognize that the narrative being pushed is not in alignment and it's manipulated narrative. So how do we come back to this place where we can find a common ground, at the same time ensuring that that narrative isn't being spread? So to me, it's a harm reduction piece where we say, I'm going to hold you accountable for the ideas and the narratives that you distribute online. And so if you become a distributor on a mass scale, then I think it is in a way, it feels like a duty to highlight that and speak to that. And when we notice that kind of mass spread of information, to actually not necessarily pass judgment, but just hold the light. Oh, that's not true. Here's some factual information.
Yeah. There's one of the things that I like to come back to in these conversations is trying to get clarity on the difference between a personal experience and the sharing of information that you have learned. It seems like such a simple thing, but it is not a simple thing. I think so. I'd say 98% of our conversations, we're speaking about things that we've not experienced. We have read about, and so it becomes a part of our narrative. and we're even arguing about it or commiserating about it, but it's not the same thing as, I felt the grass on my feet this morning. I was yelled at by a police officer yesterday. You know, and being able to discern the difference between arguing over my experiences and arguing over a perspective that I have adopted, you know, is so different. And if I can remember that, then it allows all conversations to have either, you know, anchoring or a relaxed attachment to it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, that's kind of why, as we've gone through creating content, so back to like Project OneVoice, essentially all we do is put out content, trauma-informed content that's designed to help us connect on that emotional level and our value system, things that we care about, our compassion, our care for the planet, our care for equity, our care for animals. So there's like so many layers. So we work on first establishing that emotional connection with our audience and then providing just basic, simple data points without making any point, without making any narrative, without having any agenda, because we got to respect the audience. And I think this is where it's at, is that a lot of people that put out content, it comes with an agenda. And so in this space, it's like, no, I'm going to just give you a bunch of information and respect you and your cognitive capabilities as the audience to make a really good deductive decision and reasoning on your end with that information. I got to say, as we start gathering this information and writing this content, we become hyper aware of our own biases. And we go through 3-4 levels of editing by different perspectives and different people. It took us weeks to just put together our editorial voice. It's a lot of work it provides, in a way, this template provides a framework for us as content creators to be more mindful, to check our biases more regularly, and to become my speech, what I choose to put out into the world has vastly, drastically been changed in the course of the last few months as a result of trying to find a new template that works. And it's very unnatural. It takes effort. It's not natural to us. We're kind of designed to be these tribal people and be still very primal in our brain and our responses. And it takes so much effort to pull that back and engage from a constructive template. It's work.
Yeah. So if people want to be more connected to Project OneVoice or connect with you, how can they, what can they do?
Yeah, great question. So the best way to connect with Project OneVoice is follow us on social media. You can go to projectonevoice.org and all of our social media links are there. Just please follow us, share our content if it resonates. You can already see we have a repository of content. If you're a content creator and influencer, you can also feel free to take our content and post it as your own. Just make sure that you give us a credit and use our hashtags. Because we're not necessarily looking to create a brand for Project OneVoice. We're more looking at creating an opportunity for different influencers and different individuals in the community to take the content that resonates with them and help spread the medicine, because we really see this content as medicine.
I love it. Beautiful. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to connect with you. Thank you for, doing the good work and doing it with such a beautiful heart and so much. It's so appreciated. And I love you. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. Love you too. And thank you all for joining here. We look forward to having you at Project OneVoice.
Yes, stay connected. We will see you soon.